because the film's quite fun. So I wanted to sort of balance that out with more cooler vibes, balancing off the different. If you've got a bit too much of this, add a bit of this, and creating some mystery. Really, it's like bringing things up and down. If a performance is more comedic and you want to bring it down, music's a bit more serious. So you're
Yeah.
just leveling things out. It was a sort of a discovery, for Vicky too, as she was making it. She had a very clear vision of what she wanted to make, but it's no, I've never seen this film before, so I don't think anyone had. So it was a case of
Yeah.
just going in and just finding it. She managed to do a brilliant job, and it all
Yeah.
came together in the end.
Hi, I'm Chad Anderson, one of the hosts at Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify their skill set. You can learn more on filmmakeru.com or follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u. Every week, we are delighted to interview a film and TV professional, and this week we are exceptionally pleased to be joined by editor Richard Smither, whose work includes Industry, Alex Rider, and this crazy film that I just watched called Pretty Lethal. Richard, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk to us and answer our questions.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. Yeah.
Um, this film, I was surprised by the way the film opened. There's kind of a bit of a prologue of the dancers and the trip, and then I guess maybe at like an eighth into it, you go to a title screen, and you flash up the Pretty Lethal title screen, which I thought was just not done as much anymore in terms of storytelling. Was there an idea behind this, or was there a motivation behind this that decided to go with kind of prologue, title screen, and then into, the crux of the film?
It actually happened when I was putting the assembly together for the director. I was kind of just the first time of fitting the whole film together. So I was putting scenes together and laying sequences together. And we got to the moment where Devora pulls the doors in and crushes them into camera. And the first thought I had was, okay, well, that's a great opportunity to cut to black.
Yeah,
Doors closing, a really heavy bass noise as doors close gives you a little breather. Um, and then I think also, kind of just come off Industry the job before, and they put their main title sometimes quite far into the episode
yeah,
at a kind of a crux point of the episode where the episode starts to turn and sort of it's on its way. It's found its direction. So I think I was slightly influenced by that to even put the main title into the assembly, to even think that I would want to find that
yeah,
stage. Um, and then also tonally the film's changing. It becomes, because the film's original title was Ballerina Overdrive, which is quite a bold title
yeah,
for a bold film. Um, so it did feel like it had become what the film title was at that point.
yeah,
Up until then, you might sit there and think you're watching a sports film, a ballerina film, or a dance film, and then it's
yeah.
become okay, we're locked in, and we have to fight to come out. So probably all of those things together, but instinct. But then looking back, you go, okay, it's probably a mixture of those different elements.
Yeah, it reminds me. You talk about it from a TV standpoint. I watch a lot of TV shows with my son. He's 12 right now, and he gets excited about when the title card is going to come in, because this is a TV show element of, like, there's a prologue, and then he waits for it, and he kind of tries to predict the title card's going to
Yeah.
come in and hit you there. Uh, so from that perspective, from your background, from your biography, working on shows, uh, you have worked on TV shows like Industry. Uh, is there a kind of a physical difference between, or a mental difference, setting your mind to working on a TV show versus working on a full-length feature film like this?
Well, I think the big thing is you get a lot more time,
Sure.
and you get a lot more control early on. So Film really is a kind of an editor's medium because you get
Yeah.
a bit longer to get your assembly ready, which is really helpful. And then you get the director's cut, which in TV is usually a week per episode,
Mhm.
where I
Sure.
come from. But on a film could be, you might you hopefully you'd get 10 weeks, but you might get 6 or 8. But you certainly get enough time to sit with the director and really um you have a bit of space, breathing room to fix story problems, come up with new ideas, and really go at it. You get enough time to really make the most out of it and
Yeah.
transform it before you get input. Whereas in TV, you have a quick director's cut week, which is a scramble. It's a mad scramble to get it done, and then you're getting notes immediately. So you've you're having some decisions that you might solve on your own in film. You are passing over to other people. So I think
Sure.
film's a great training ground, especially low budget films. It's a great place for an editor to start and learn how to fix problems and expand their storytelling abilities. And then you can go to TV and work in that medium and cross combine the skill sets.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love film because I get more time and time allows more ideas and a better product, really.
Yeah, I mean, for TV, it's a lot of there's a pacing issue of like, yeah, we have to get this done, we have to get this many pages done by this week, and
Yeah.
there's no freedom there. From what I read, you came into this film pretty early on. I mean, you were kind of in the almost in the development stage of this, and there were some ideas that transpired that from an editor's eye or from an editor's perspective, you could say let's take this in a direction that went a little bit more story crafting in terms of there. Is that an enjoyable experience for you getting to be involved in from the the inception of this all through to the post-production process?
So I heard about the film quite early because Vicky Jewson, the director, had created a relationship with a company called 87 North, big Hollywood action
Yeah,
company who make these amazing action films. So that was very exciting. And then because we have a friendship and we've worked together before, we'd just sit and talk. Also with Rupert Whitaker, her partner, creative partner, and her husband. And she'd been working on the script with Kate Frying, the writer, who'd written this really fun script that you saw, with these young girls. And Kate had a background in ballet. But one of the things we were looking at was sort of looking at the cross-cutting between the girls and Devorah's storyline and having enough in the edit to play with and keeping the tension going. So we kind of one of the things we talked about was Devorah's storyline, and we worked on that a bit and tried to give her this kind of almost tragic, make her more of a tragic villain rather than out
hmm
villain. So she has a bit more to play with. Um, and that allowed me to balance off the sort of action scenes and the creeping around tension with more of a mystery in the edit. So I have
yeah,
the elements I need to cook and build them together and build to the end. So you're helping yourself a little bit if you manage to have a great relationship with your director and directors listens and collaborates. And I didn't have I had my small input. Obviously, the script is written by the writer and the director's input, but in that
sure.
element, it does help me in the end. And we're lucky we got Uma Thurman signed on to do the film, which was amazing. A few weeks before we started, I heard that we've got Uma doing it, and she really sort of dug into that role and found the sort of duality to the character.
Yeah, I saw that 87 North was doing this when I saw the opening credits there, and I was like, oh,
Mm.
okay. So I saw Bullet Train, I saw The Fall Guy, and I know this company, and I know they have a really distinct opening animation there. In terms of that, in terms of tone, you mentioned that there was a tonal shift before and after the title slide. I'm always interested in what the director gives to an editor in terms of tone of what is the tone of the film we're trying to do, and how is that tone conveyed in terms of providing you with any kind of necessary meaning that you go into the edit with, of like, I'm trying to make this scary, I'm trying to make this serious, I'm trying to make this like nostalgic, I'm trying to make this comedic, I'm trying to make this lighthearted. What was really the emotion that was conveyed to you in terms of how you approach the editing?
I'm led originally by the script. So the original script by Kate is a very light-hearted comedy.
Yeah.
It became it that toned down a little bit. It became a bit more serious. Still
hmm
very light-hearted, very much comedic, as you know from watching it. Um, And then I'm looking at the performances really, and then looking at how Vicky's directed the actors and how she shot it. So I'm really
Yeah.
getting a feel off that. We did have a lot of different tones in the film. As you can tell, it's quite a wide palette in the movie. There's quite a lot of
Yeah.
different elements to it. So that was fairly intimidating early on, was looking at it coming in and going, oh, we've got, American ballerinas, we've got Eastern European bar, we've got, Devora's background. I've got
Hmm.
these villains. It's very heightened. So I used a lot of temp music to manage tone.
Oh,
So I
interesting.
used Ennio Morricone, the Hateful Eight for Devora. So I started trying to put more Morricone in and try and drill into that kind of cool, because the film's quite fun. It's very fun, and
It is.
so I wanted to sort of balance that out with more cooler vibes. Balancing off the different. If you've got
Yeah.
a bit too much of this, add a bit of this, and creating some mystery, and really it's like bringing things up and down in terms of if a performance is more comedic and you want to bring it down, music's a bit more serious, so you're
Yeah.
just leveling things out. But it was a sort of a discovery, I think for Vicky too, as she was making it. She had a very clear vision of what she wanted to make, but it's no, I've never seen this film before, so I don't think anyone had. So it was a case of
Yeah.
just going in and just finding it, and she managed to do a brilliant job doing that, and it all
Yeah.
came together in the end.
From a cinematography standpoint, the color is really you talk about like tonal shift from very dramatic to very kind of absurd to very kind of actiony to very comedic. But also there's a lot of color going on. There's a lot of color in the tonality, and so it's almost like the narrative reflects that those shifts almost there of
Mm.
really, really intense blues and some intense oranges and pinks and stuff there. There's a lot of abstract color in there that works really well. I want to ask you about the action sequences. It's a challenge, I imagine. I've never edited an action sequence that involves so many characters because there is, I guess there's a sense of a protagonist, but there's a multitude of storylines we're following between the different ballerinas and their different lives, etc. But when you get into this mid-bar action sequence, this kind of more towards the finale action sequence, um, climactic, uh, there's multiple fighters fighting multiple people in multiple environments. And I assume that these women are not all professional ballerinas. Uh, so you have stunt doubles. Um, how overwhelming was that to coordinate in the editing room?
Well, we had three different fights that were all very different. We had the first fight with its Bones and Ossip, which is kind of a very brutal, tension-filled fight for survival. Now, within that fight, it was choreographed, but there were options to change the edit, move things around, and really try and create, something that I was feeling in real time. Second fight was similar to that, but it had more characters. But it was a bit more designed in terms of like more lots of in-camera shots. As you see, there's a lot of we're following characters and moving things around. And then the final bar fight really was very choreographed. So when I got it in, it was, you know, brilliantly constructed. And I can't tell really, even as the editor watching the who's the stunt person, who's the I couldn't. There's
Yeah,
but there's a moment where Bones jumps on Ossip's fight in the first, and she's banging into the wall before banging into the cupboard before she goes through the wall. That was a stunt double I never knew. I would never have
yeah,
seen it because it's just really well done. So the third fight was just um very choreographed, and it was just about, I could change angles and cut round things and manipulate things and condense them and create a rhythm by just jumping through things. Um, but it takes a lot of preparation to make something like that. As you can see, it's very comedic and balletic, that fight. It's very,
yeah.
very orchestrated. So
Yeah, I mean it's climactic because it's a serious action fight sequence of the girls finally achieving this kind of camaraderie and overcoming these
yeah,
obstacles, but it's also very playful. It's also kind of,
yeah,
surreal kind of playfulness of, them doing these ballerina moves and with the knives in their toes and everything else there. And so the rhythm does suggest a sense of this kind of, almost campy kind of playfulness there. I don't know if campy is the right word, but there's a playfulness there that exudes in the editing style of this.
yeah. Well, it's built into the. I'm feeding off the rhythm of the choreography. So I'm responding to the rhythms that are in the footage. to either how the actors are playing it or how it's shot, the camera's moving. So that one in particular, I think the third fight is the payoff for the earlier fights because
Yeah,
the first fight's so brutal and full of tension. I know I love the first fight. The second fight has a lot of tension up front because we cut the music out. You know, if you notice
yeah,
that it's all sound design kind of still, and then the music comes in. Then they begin to find that what they called ballet fou, their fighting style, and they begun to find themselves. And
yeah,
then by the end of that, you've almost reached the point of like they're beginning to enjoy themselves.
yeah,
And then the third fight's just fun. I think it's a real payoff, and it's heightened. But I think
y-
each stage, it's important that each fight's different, and that
yeah.
they're going from a serious place to a bit more fun.
That's
So
interesting.
you need to keep the tension in the story. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you let the balloon out, and then we're not scared of anything if it's too fun too early. So
Yeah, and in terms of character development, it's like the three act play. There's a bit of a
yeah,
growth there in
yeah,
that in the first fight they're not sure they can do this. They're only weak girl ballerinas as they see themselves,
yeah,
and they're not, and these are professional killers per se, and they don't have
yes,
that confidence. And then by the second one they're starting to get that, and the third one they're all into
yeah.
that moment there.
We one of the things we did was use the ballet music. Originally in the assembly, I took the ballet music from the opening dance and put it onto that third fight. I think when they were performing it on set, it was more of a sort of, well, I don't know if that's completely accurate, but I remember there's a bit more of a sort of pop dancey feel to it. Could be a bit more like that. But by starting off in ballet with the Nutcracker music, it's referencing the ballet moves. So we're definitely going, okay, well, they're going back to the teaching of what Miss Thorner taught them at the beginning,
Sure.
and then they're pulling that through. And then that created a different vibe for the whole dance. And it became like a waltz all the way through, which is really fun.
I'm curious about use of visual effects. There seem to be a lot of practical effects in here, but there also seems to be, I'm sure, some invisible visual effects. As an editor working with a visual effects department, what was the experience like, and what was kind of how did the workflow go?
We had a VFX editor called Connor who did a great job, who was with us from the beginning of the director's cut. And Connor would go through the cut basically and start passing shots over, and then bring them back and cutting them into the sequence. And then we'd do reviews every few weeks, go through and review shots as they come in. And then I'd sit with Vicky and give feedback on things. It was a kind of a constant train of new shots coming in and refinements and then replacements all the way through to the end. So you may have noticed we had a few face replacements for the girls in different places. That was probably the trickiest stuff to get right. Signs, adding things into the. We had a few. We created some shots of Uma as a young ballerina, which we put in photo frames. That
Yeah,
was kind of fun. Um, on the wall. The explosion at the end, adding a little bit of something to that.
sure.
There's a lot of crowd insertion into the end ballet sequence when they're in the theatre. We didn't have an audience there, so that was all built out. So it wasn't a massive visual effects project, but there were very specific things that we needed help on.
So there's a lot of things done in camera on set that took care of a lot of
Yeah,
that.
definitely. Yeah, they did a great job. A lot of the stuff, swapping out the dancers and the actors and swapping them around,
Yeah.
allowed us to get around a lot of problems. Because then
Wow.
you
Yeah.
have, sometimes you have um, Bones and Princess in the shot, and the other dancers are all professional ballerinas. Sometimes it's all of the actresses. So it's a mixture of things that they could do practically, and then fill in later on anything that you couldn't do.
How much freedom were you given? I was curious about the relationship between a director and the editor in terms of points at which in the story you can say, "Hey, this is not working," or "This would work better if." Some directors I know are very tied to their script or tied to their vision of what it may be. Some are given a lot more, "Hey, you have an idea, just run with it," and I give you the freedom to run with it. How much freedom do you think you were given on this?
Vicky's extremely open to discussions, so she's brilliant at that. So if you're sitting with her, I have no fear of saying what I think does or doesn't work. And similarly, she will constantly be judging things and coming up with the same kind of thoughts. So it's kind of it doesn't feel like you're working separately. It feels like you're a little bit of a high, once you're up and running, it feels like you've got one brain really, and you're both sort of firing into each other. And I think that comes from having worked together before. So probably when we did our first film together, Close, there's an early feeling out process with the director where you're earning trust, and you're treading carefully and you're trying to sort of
Sure.
listen how they respond. But by Pretty Lethal, I kind of knew that we had created that trust between us in terms of creative feedback and in terms of being in the edit and the
It's
director's
great.
cut and really looking at stuff. So both of us just want to make it better. And if you come up with a cool idea, I always say there's a multiple things. You've got to spot the problem, and then you have to be brave enough to do something about it. Sometimes it can look intimidating, and then you need to come up with the right solution. So you sort of almost like three things you need to get right to
Yeah.
really improve something.
Yeah, great. It's always wonderful to have that kind of, relationship with a director that you can say, hey, I think this would work better to do this, and I think I want to work in this direction, and or I at least want to try it, you
Yeah.
know. God bless
Uh,
computer-based editing that you can change your mind if it doesn't work.
Exactly, and that's the beauty of having the director's cut,
Yeah,
compared to TV where you have time. There certainly was pressure. We knew we were trying to deliver an action film. 87 North were producing, Kelly McCormick were producing it. You know what the expectations are for the action scenes in particular. So you want
sure.
to deliver a high quality. So certainly was pressure, but also within that you have to be brave and confront problems and try and evolve the film. Because if you
Yeah.
you know if you don't, then you will regret it because someone else will come along and do it for you.
I am Chad Anderson with Manhattan Edit Workshop, and I am thrilled to introduce you to an introduction to Avid Media Composer. We'll cover all the basics from setting up the software and importing footage to editing, trimming, effects, audio, titles, media management, and everything in between. You'll have access to over 7 hours of self-paced lessons delivered in easy to understand segments, all with professional footage that you can download to work along with. And when you're finished with the course, you can use it to keep working or edit something of your own. We're also happy to offer live online office hours that anyone can schedule with me, so we can work out a tricky problem, review concepts, or even have a creative session to evaluate your edit. MuseShop's online introduction to Avid Media Composer is the perfect way to get a hands-on, in-person training experience in a self-paced, on-demand package. I'm Chad Anderson, and I can't wait to help you master Avid Media Composer.
I have a question that's kind of personal to me. I teach at a college, and one of the things that we do is, we talk to students about professional careers, and I often recommend, the foot in the door is to be an assistant editor before you become an editor. What was your experience working with assistant editors, and how do you use, or what do you look for in terms of assistant editors on this film, if you use them?
I was an assistant myself for a long time,
Yeah,
and an assembly editor. I was kind of bouncing between the two for a long time. So it was very interesting stepping up to editor and then looking back.
yeah,
Things make a lot more sense. How editors were when you were an assistant make a lot more sense once you become an editor, and vice versa. So I had a great assistant on this called Lincoln Witter, who is fantastic. So things I'm looking for, honesty. It's really important to me. Um, Loyalty, especially these days with assistants. They're there to look after you really, and you to look after them. So you need to form a good team and bond. Um, Organization, good communication with other departments. A really critical one is thinking ahead. So ideally, the most important. Self-sufficiency. If I really want to have the assistant, look after that department and be on top of things without me having to prompt check and ask ahead, and have you done this, is this coming up, because that's taking my eyes off the edit.
yeah,
Those are the main things really. I think I came up in a time when the editors I worked for, my job was to make them look good.
yeah.
I don't know if I always did that. I was my job, what your aim is I'm there to look after you, and do everything to make you look good to your boss. And usually the editor would then reward that with giving you some lessons, teaching you some things, potentially putting you forward for editing jobs. I've
Sure.
had editing referrals off, like, all of the editors I work for have put me forward for jobs as an editor. They're still friends of mine today. I think if you get that kind of bond, it becomes really fun if you're going to work with your friend.
Yeah.
If you really begin to like the person, if you earn the respect and trust, and then you're not just your boss, but your friends too. I love that.
Yeah, I often talk to them about, there's not knowing the technical skills is one thing, but what you talked about kind of I would encapsulate as like taking the initiative to be like, the editor needs this and I can do this and that will save a bunch of time to do this, and having that sense of like, here's a problem, here's a solution, I can figure that out and I don't need to
Yeah.
check with the editor to do it. Yeah, it's really great that you say that. Last final question I'm going to ask, Richard, if you were not doing this, if you were not a film and TV editor, would there be something else that a young Richard always dreamed of becoming as a career or a future goal?
I always loved animals. So when I was a kid, I always wanted to be a vet. But then I learned that you have to do some nasty things as a vet that I didn't want to do. So I think kind of marine biology in that department, I kind of exploration. I love traveling, exploring. Um, Something probably scientific. Um, Helping people or making a difference. As a young person, films were very influential on me. And as I get older, you look at other things in life that you look at to, that you can make a difference.
Sure.
So probably something like that where you're going out and doing something positive.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Richard, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Pleasure.
It was an entertaining film. I
Thank
enjoyed
you.
watching it with my children.
Yeah.
Little violent in some places, but
Yes. Sorry about that.
they're okay. They can handle it.
Yeah.
Thank you so
I
much for
mean,
taking time to talk to us about our
yeah.
questions. And that is going to be it for us for Filmmaker U. Again, you can check us out at filmmakeru.com or follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u. I am Chad Anderson. I'm going to say thank you again to our guest editor, Richard Smither of the film Pretty Lethal, and we'll see you on the next episode.